So, how can you believe that Scripture is true? I mean, there is a lot of places, people mentioned in Scripture, and you can match that up with historical facts of those people and the places. And Scripture has events that took place within those places and within those time frames that can be verified by history. So there's many things that prove the Bible to be true. It's a history book. It records genealogies, places, actions, laws, sacrifices, rituals, um, diseases, animals that were used. I mean, how specific buildings, how they were built from the minutiaest of details, how boats were built, how the ark was built. So there's so much in there. It's an instruction book. It's a history book. But the reason I believe Scripture the most is because the message of Scripture cannot come from a human being. It cannot be from human beings. Scripture is inspired by God. Many people contributed to writing the books that comprise the Bible, but they all had God's Spirit. And even though they wrote it, God directed them and inspired them to write Scripture. And the true Scripture is infallible and it's perfect. Even though Bibles have been mistranslated, but that came later, the Scriptures are accurate. And if you can get to the core of the Scriptures in their original form, you have God's perfect Word. But the reason I believe Scripture most of all is because the message can't possibly come from a human being because human beings don't get it. They don't understand the message of Scripture, and it's supernatural that they don't understand it. And this can be evidenced by the work of the Apostle Paul, who says that we are saved by grace through faith, and it is not of us, lest anyone can boast. It's such a foreign project, such a foreign event to get something for nothing that human beings can't understand it today. They can't wrap their brains around it. And the people of Paul's time and biblical times, they couldn't wrap their mind around it because they're so used to law and performing to achieve something for God. And we today, as Americans, or really it doesn't matter what country you live in, you perform and you base your pride on how you perform in life and anything you do in your job. So it's such a foreign element to get something for nothing, but that's what grace is. And Paul's message, he clearly states throughout his 13 letters that God takes sinners, the worst of sinners, and he puts them on a pedestal, not because of anything they have done, but while they were still sinners, and out of no act of their own, Jesus Christ gives them his own righteousness based on what he did, his faith in believing God, that when he died, that God would raise him from the dead. And Jesus went through that whole process and gives us exactly what he did. He gives us his righteousness. And there's nothing we can do to earn it. There's nothing we can do to lose it. It's completely and totally based on his grace and his choice to give it to us. That's God's message. And it can't come from a human being. It can't be made up because a human being doesn't even understand it. Every human being, even in Paul's time, tries to inject law into it and say, no, Jesus didn't just give you the righteousness. You still have to do X, Y, and Z in order to get it or to maintain it. They inject law into it. That was the whole argument and why Paul wrote so many of his letters to keep this law out of his message of grace, because people couldn't handle it. The Jewish people, Israelites of that time, they lived their whole lives following a law. So when that perfect grace came, where God takes people through his son Jesus Christ and puts them on top of the mountain, and they didn't have to climb and struggle to get there, because it's all based on what Jesus Christ did for them. The people that have struggled their whole lives with law couldn't handle it. They need to have some sort of pride, some sort of achievement to say that they're better than other people because they did this and that person did not. People today do the same thing. They can't accept the fact that Jesus Christ and what he did applies without any act on behalf of that person. It's based on what Jesus Christ did for that person. You can't earn it. You can't do anything to lose it. You've been chosen since the foundation of the world, before time began, before sin was even around. So sin cannot wreck it for you. It's given to you by Jesus Christ. But the people of today, they still inject law into it. They say that you have to do works. You have to believe or make a choice. And remember, works are what you do to achieve something. So they can't just accept the message of God's grace. They have to be able to do something to say that they earned it, so that they can put themselves above other people. So that's how you know that the message of Scripture cannot be from a human, because the human injects their own pride and their own law into it. When you read the Apostle Paul's message, he completely takes law out of it, and he says that. Takes law out of it and gives the gift. Jesus Christ gives the gift of his righteousness to us. Just like death was given to us through Adam, Jesus Christ gives us his righteousness based on no action of our own. It's supernatural to look at this book and not understand the message of grace, because it's written so plainly in Paul's letters. But it's also supernatural to understand it, because so few people get it, because they're so charged and so designed to need to earn what they get. And that's the human being. But God's message is one of grace. It's that you can never achieve the standard of God. So he does it for us. We can't attain his righteousness, so Jesus did it for us and gives it to us. And then he chooses certain people supernaturally to come to an end of themselves and understand their worthlessness to be righteous, so that they are ready to accept the righteousness of Jesus Christ. And that's Scripture. And that's completely separate from anything that a human being can come up with. So that's my number one reason for believing that these Scriptures are true.